This is going to be one of my most important videos on the channel. It's not only going to be insightful, but I think it's going to help a lot of you. And it will certainly contradict what a lot of doctors will tell you, what basically the whole general consensus will tell you. And even what a lot of these like masculinity leaders in the community, the types of people who say like depression, isn't real or whatever. It's going to contradict a lot of that. I really don't see anyone offering a solution, but all of this is going to revolve around understanding your biology to a higher level. And specifically, I wanted to help you understand generalist genes, specifically what polygenicity means and what pleiotropy means. And it's going to allow you to have a better understanding of yourself. And hopefully, you watching this video right now will be sufficient enough as an environmental influence to allow you to improve your life or just live happier. But, it's unlikely that little old me is going to be enough to move the needle. I'm just one environmental influence. But, as we talk about with heritability snowballing, you do have some genetics that make it very likely that... What are you doing, bro? This guy is so attached. Bro, you have to be stoic. You cannot be attached to anything. Come on. Anyway, let's start with polygenicity, right? Polygenicity explains that your traits, like say some psychiatric traits like depression or being schizophrenic, essentially they are created by like tens of thousands of genes. There's no such thing as like a depression gene or an ADHD gene or anything of that nature. All of those psychiatric traits are comprised of many, many different genes. Now, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, there's only like a couple 10,000 genes to play with. How is that possible? And that's where you get into the other term, and that's pleiotropy. That's where one single gene is responsible for influencing many different traits. And this isn't just in terms of psychiatric traits. This is also in terms of everything, in terms of physical traits, in terms of general cognitive intelligence, little g and little p. So yeah, it's important to understand that all of these traits, they're made up of tens of thousands of genes, and these same genes are also responsible for influencing tons of other traits. So there's no like on or off gene for like your likelihood to be depressed or your likelihood to have ADHD or whatnot. And we're soon going to get into what it means for you to have a likelihood of having those psychiatric traits in a little bit, and how to live in accordance with them, which again I said will probably contradict basically the entire general consensus's advice, but I do believe it to be true. Anyway, so whatever it is, like ADHD or depression or whatever, a lot of these people in the psychiatric fields for decades have completely misunderstood all of these things. They would make it seem like you couldn't have schizophrenia and depression at the same time, like you'd be diagnosed as like one or the other. But what you have to understand is that all of these psychiatric traits, it's really just a sliding scale. There's no like yes or no, you have it. And there's actually no such thing as a disorder. So none of these things are disorders. Having chronic depression, that's a real thing. I'm actually not one of those people, like in the masculinity genres that will say like depression's not real. But I will encourage you to manipulate your mind to believe that, because then it'll have a higher likelihood of you conquering that. We'll get into that later because that is a pretty deep concept. But depression is a very real thing. And really any of these negative traits, they're all very real things. And this is just a residue of evolution. And at one point, they were advantageous to have. And throughout evolution, they weren't disadvantageous enough to eliminate you from the gene pool. So, depending on the environment you're experiencing, they might harm you a little bit. Like you might feel unhappy if you're depressed, but at the same time, you're still going to be able to survive and reproduce. And that's what really matters. That's why these things still exist in us today. But that was a little bit of a tangent. And it's an important tangent because I really want to make you guys understand that all your weaknesses, all these like disorders that people will say you have, they're not disorders for one. And for two, you could actually leverage them as strengths. We're going to get into that and how it's a completely different handling to what the general consensus would suggest when it comes to handling anything that you're diagnosed with. But anyway, back to the sliding scale before I went off on that tangent. So there's no like on or off for having this disorder, as they would say. Again, it's not a disorder, but there's no like, it's not like binary. It's not yes or no. You have these polygenic scores that will show like if you're more likely to exhibit these certain psychiatric traits, or not just that, certain physical traits, or all traits, just all traits in general, like related to cognitive intelligence, related to your physical traits, whatever. All of this, it's a sliding scale, and that's because environment is going to play part of the factor too. Now, we've already talked about heritability snowballing and how environment is not the environment that the retard nigga Freud likes to explain it as. It's actually extremely more complex. So we're going to try not to go off onto that tangent now. But yeah, a lot of the environment, almost all of it, is stochastic. And that means it's just completely like random. Like parents, they'll try to have an influence on you, but it's really not going to be what's driving the environmental changes. And a lot of those environmental changes are from you creating your environment through genes that may seem uncorrelated on the surface, but oh God, we're going down the fucking tangent. Jesus Christ. Anyway, back to the spectrum, right? So what's interesting about this spectrum is something like, let's say, schizophrenia. It turns out that a lot of people rank very high in their polygenic scores for schizophrenia. And it is extremely strange because these are high-functioning individuals in society. They're not deemed as crazy as normal people would say. They're not crazy. They're not weird or whatever. Like, they're just functioning individuals in society. Even though they tend to have a polygenic score that's really high in terms of schizophrenia. And usually it's these people, they just tend to have like very high creativity. And so like these people, they'll end up in jobs like artist jobs, making movies or something like that. I know for me personally, for example, I get a lot of these visions of edits, like, short form edits on Reels and TikTok with music attached to them. When I'm working out or driving and I'm in that zone, I get a lot of these visions of these edits. I see it in my mind. And really what schizophrenia is, it's like you go a bit too far outside the box. And it's not just creativity and visualization. It's also just like neurodivergent thinking as well. Just like thinking outside the box a bit. And so, yes, that means like a lot of creators in this space, including myself, they're not always high IQ. As you know, yours truly, I'm fucking retarded. But yeah, a lot of these creators, they're not high IQ. They're really just neurodivergent and schizophrenic, really. But that, don't take that the wrong way. That doesn't mean like schizophrenic the way the general consensus would lead you to believe. It just means that their mind sort of departs from reality and their imagination tends to take over a little bit more. But this could very well be a strength. Like this is a very good thing. Are there people doing fireworks? Yeah, some hooligans in the projects down below. No way, that's fucking sick. While I was recording the video. That's fucking sick. Yeah, yeah, cool. Fuck, my train of thought. My dog is scared as shit too. He's fucking tweaking. It's all right, bro. Don't worry. It's all right, man. You see, he's an example. He's a body just like us, living in radically different environments than what we're used to. Evolution cannot keep up in these several generations. That was the industrial and technical revolution. He is not meant to comprehend the sound of a firework, and consequently he's fucking tweaking out. But some dogs are ignorant to it. It's funny how that works out. God damn, these tangents. Okay, we were talking about how schizophrenia could be beneficial, right? Okay, so it could be beneficial, schizophrenia as our example, right? And what's another thing, right? So ADHD, for example, that's something I have as well. I've never been diagnosed. I never went to go check this out, but there are certain things that lead me to believe that I am certainly ADHD. Like I'll be doing a lot of work, right? But when my computer starts to load or something, like it buffers, I immediately go to check my phone and I'm checking the notifications on there. I rapidly switch tasks back and forth. When I'm in school, I really could give a fuck about what the teacher is saying, but instead I'm doing like my other homework or for a different class, or, this is back when I was in high school and just starting my business. Instead of just paying attention to the teacher, I'd be going to work on my business. And obviously, you could say a lot of that is just prioritizing, what I saw would be ideal for my future and all, but I can tell, in my tendencies, how I like rapidly switch tasks and lose focus for things I don't care too much about. And also a more interesting one, we're going to leave this part for Discord exclusive, so if you're interested, feel free to join the Discord. I'm going to make a cut. Now back to public YouTube after that little cut. Again, I encourage you to join the Discord below. So yeah, like all these psychiatric traits, whether it's depression or schizophrenia or whatever, all of these things, they have like strengths to them. They have benefits to them. Everything's ideal in moderation, right? Like everyone has a little bit of schizophrenia. Everyone's, kind of in the middle range. Most people are in that middle range for schizophrenia. Most people are in that middle range for OCD. But if you get a little too high on that range for OCD, you get someone like some YouTube channel I recently came across, Spectrum Aesthetics, or myself. I'm also OCD, and this is why you see me explaining all these things on YouTube, like how we have no free will, right? And everything's deterministic. And I try to rationalize every single thing and put things into boxes and see life as very mechanical. And when this guy Spectrum Aesthetics started talking about this in his video, because he uploaded one recently about him doing 7 surgeries or whatever, he talked about his views on life and how he sees everything mechanically. And the reason he thinks this way, and the reason I think this way too, it's OCD. It's a consequence of OCD. It's actually not a consequence of high IQ. Now, a lot of those things, they can be correlated. There is high correlation with them. But don't like misunderstand it as like, oh, this is so high IQ. I'm also not trying to discount his IQ or anything. I'm just saying this is like a pretty misunderstood thing. But yeah, like too much of one thing, it could lead to, that kind of neurodivergent thinking. So obviously if he were to be tested, his polygenic scores would be very high in schizophrenia and OCD. Um, but he's leveraging that. He's leveraging that and creating the channel, I guess. But that's a whole conversation if that's going to be a net benefit or not, because he's publicizing his gene frauding, which I never would advocate doing. But I guess it's so hard to get away with it scot-free if it's on your face. That's why you really have to make sure you're winning the harmony gamble by a long shot if you're operating on your face, because people are going to know you gene frauded unless you move locations. And even if he moves locations, the results are uncanny currently. Hopefully that doesn't come off as disrespectful, but he did articulate himself that he's self-aware that it's a little uncanny, so I hope he doesn't take that the wrong way. I mean, what's done is done anyway. But yeah, I also like to think about how high IQ relates to undergoing surgeries like this, or choosing not to because of your understanding of what could become uncanny or not. And it's the same thing with girls doing makeup. Like, you see black girls always wearing like ridiculous eyelashes, for instance, right? But that's not so common in other races. One of those things that makes you think, right? Anyway, so that was a wicked tangent. Goddamn. Anyway, so these other traits, like whether it's OCD, schizophrenia, depression, or whatever, everyone has these to some degree on the sliding scale. All of us, we have it to a little bit of a degree. The most common one that everyone, is exhibiting a high degree of is obesity. And the people who have it to the lowest degree, it is Robert Plumman's speculation that those people are where we see eating disorders manifest and people being severely underweight. So, like, too much of a good thing can become a bad thing, right? Look at this view. But this leads me to say, these traits, even if you have them to a very high degree, which people label them as disorders, like calling schizophrenia a disorder. Well, it was my schizophrenia and my ADHD and my whatever the fuck. Like, all of these disorders, right? They all happen to come together to allow me to create this life. And now I have lots of difficulties in my life, obviously, as a consequence. There's a trade-off with, like, being neurodivergent, for example. That has plenty of trade-offs. I've had to train myself how to act neurotypical in public. And we've talked about, the whole fucking retarded cope of people saying, just be yourself, like, you shouldn't feel the need to put on a mask. Like, all right, we had a whole conversation about that fucking retardation. Yeah, you got to be a little more long-term thinking, discipline. Anyway, all these disorders, right? They led me to this, right? And now I know you're going to say, like, oh, materialism, materialism doesn't make you happy, Well, look, do you think I would be fucking better off if I, like, didn't achieve any of this? It's not even about the material. Like, it's the fact that I achieved something. Like, I feel good about that. I feel good. I have a lot of adhonia. How do you fucking pronounce it? I don't know. Like, I do struggle to, like, feel joy from experiences. But I'm not going to say, like, I'm fucking chronically depressed or anything. I'm very stoic, too, so I don't give a fuck how I feel. It doesn't matter. But, yeah, all those disorders, they led me here. They led me here to living this life. And I want to give you guys some advice. And I rarely ever like to give advice, but this advice, it's about living true to your biology. And we've talked about this in many aspects, but there's so many things to discuss about living true to your biology, living congruent to your biology, and what it really means. And so one of the things would be when you get diagnosed as, like, depressed or you get diagnosed as ADHD or schizophrenic, whatever, any psychiatric disorder, they're going to give you some medication. And what this medication is doing, it's going to allow you to operate as a normal individual in like a average environment for the modern day, in modern society. It's going to allow you to function to a higher degree and allow these disorders to not negatively impact you so much, right? Now, what you're doing when you do this, I want to create I'll illustrate a little visualization. What you're doing is you're not changing your biology, but you're putting a mask over it. So imagine you have these Rottweilers inside of you, right? Like vicious Rottweiler dogs. You're not killing those dogs and eliminating them. You're chaining them up. You're putting like collars on them and holding them back. And those vicious dogs, or whatever that disorder would be, and that would be living incongruent to your biology. Anyway, what you could choose to do instead is create an environment that allows you to prosper and benefit off of those disorders, which is precisely what I did. And remember, that doesn't mean environment the way Freud would say environment, like not this environment, not that. It's a lot more complex than that, because remember, environment is what we interact with, not what happens to us. So, for example, my environment, like when I was in school, it's not about changing the school, like going from school to homeschooled or whatever, not environment like that, but instead like bringing my laptop to school and always having like Discord open so I could operate on my business while the teacher is talking, you know? Or when it comes to schizophrenia, right? Go into some fields and engage with people that are going to allow you to pursue something more creative. Or if you're thinking like very neurodivergently, think of starting a social media where you yap a lot. And this is what I mean by environment. You know, it's not just like the place you're in. It's more than that. It's like what you're interacting with, everything you're doing. That's everything that is just not your innate genetics. Everything else, it's environment. And you can try to organize and curate your environment. Now, you guys know how I feel about free will. I believe everything is 100% deterministic. Everything's determined. Most physicists, most respectable physicists believe this. And yeah, compatibilism theory is cope. It's really just to get attention. But you could believe whatever you want. That's fine. Either way, the advice I'm giving could still apply to you. And I guess an analogy to help you understand this, if you also believe the world's determined like me, because then you'll be like, what the fuck is the point of doing anything, you know? Well, why do you watch a Marvel movie when you know the good guy is going to win? You still watch it though, you know, because the process is going to be enjoyable. You're going to have an enjoyable experience watching it. Now, Marvel's kind of gone to shit, so don't. All right, we're not going to fucking go down that tangent. But yeah, try to curate your environment to allow you to benefit from these disorders that you have. Because there was once a point throughout evolution where these things were advantageous to you. Now, there may be some scenarios where it may be too difficult for you in your regular life to immediately find some solution that allows you to do this, and perhaps temporarily you might have to cope and do some medication or whatever to cope temporarily, because it's a very complex thing to change your environment. It's a very difficult thing to like change your job, change your major in school, change the people you interact with. None of this is easy. I understand that. But you need to make an effort to try, and you will start to not just achieve great things in life through human endeavor and hopefully achieve human excellence, which will allow you to increase your chances of propagating, which is the end goal. And we had whole conversations about, the reason why you're here. That's why we're here. And if you live congruent to that, you're going to be right in line with your reward system as well. And so I know not all of you guys want kids. You don't think you want kids, but the truth is that's how our reward system is designed. And if you try to scam it with doing drugs or anything like that, you will be punished. You will be punished in the long term. From a net quality of life perspective, net enjoyment, you will be punished in the long run. But by living true to your biology, what you're here for, your reward system will give you the best rewards possible, and you will enjoy life to the highest extent possible. But yeah, all of these negative traits, these disorders, right, that we have inside of us, at one point through evolution, they were advantageous. They did have some advantage. Even depression, it was important in some environments that your ancestors for multiple generations lived through, or they had to conserve a lot of energy. They had limited food and they didn't need to do a lot of activity, and so they needed to conserve a lot of energy. So people who were depressed ended up being more likely to survive because they were expending less energy. Remember, evolution is just pragmatic. There's no conscious design to any of it. It's not like, oh yeah, depression works, so we're going to be more depressed. It's not like that. It's just like the people who weren't depressed tended to die earlier and be less likely to replicate and pass down those genes. But again, remember all this generalist genes, so don't get it fucking confused. They're still generalist genes. There's no such thing as one depressed gene. there's no one depression gene or whatever, or one ADHD gene. It's very complex. But things average out too, and this is why you will find through heritability some similarities between your father and even your grandfather and great grandfather. But then obviously it gets more complicated through genetic recombination. It's a very interesting thing. My main point with all of this, though, is instead of trying to put a mask over your biology, like everyone will suggest to you in the general consensus, take medications for your ADHD, Adderall, or taking something for your depression, instead of that, try to find some areas where you could live congruent to that. And you're going to have to often be creative for this. Depression is going to be a really difficult, nuanced thing for you to figure out. But I also did want to explain my thoughts on depression, I guess, here. I really do believe depression, I don't believe it, it's just true. People have different polygenic scores for depression, and they're more likely, more predisposed to be depressed than other people. It's a real thing, contrary to what these red pillars will tell you. But one person who understands it well is Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate is the only person in that red pill sphere who articulated this idea well. And he explains that he's even if I know something is true, even if I know evidence is suggesting depression's real, which it does, I'm going to choose not to believe it. And that's the way to approach it, honestly. You have to do mental gymnastics and try to manipulate your own mind into somehow believing that it's not real, because depression is one of the only disorders that I don't think I can find, off the top of my head at least, a solution for making it advantageous. But I'm just thinking over these few minutes of yapping. If you know a solution in the comments below where you could turn that into an advantage, other than just conserving energy, because we don't really need to conserve energy now. That was a thing of the past. We have an abundance of food and calories. So I do think depression is one of those ones that you're going to have to fight. But again, that doesn't mean take drugs. That doesn't mean go to the doctor and get things prescribed. I really don't think that's the solution. I do think the solution is more environmental, not in terms of taking the drugs, but in terms of changing your environment. But it's going to be more difficult for you for sure. But remember, it's not black and white. It's not an on or off switch. So it's going to be like obesity, right? You know, some people live on veteran difficulty, and other people, they live on rookie difficulty and other intermediate difficulty. That's the analogy I use. Like it's a Black Ops game or whatever, like Call of Duty. Some people are predisposed to being fat more than others, and that's why their appetite doesn't tend to get full so often. It's because, their ancestors through history would go through periods without food. So once they had an opportunity to eat, they needed to stack up on that food. But that wasn't everyone's ancestors. We all lived in different environments on average through time. So some people more than others are more predisposed because some people's ancestors, like the fat guy's ancestors, those ended up surviving because they were in environments where people needed to stack up on food. And the people who didn't stack up on food when they had the opportunities were weeded out of the gene pool. But then there's different environments where that wasn't the case. Now, depression works exactly the same way. It's the same thing. There were ancestors who needed to conserve energy more. But again, we're in a situation now where depression is not advantageous. Being obese, not advantageous. These are like two objective bad ones that are like outliers from the whole thing I'm explaining here. Unless you guys could find something and explain it in the comments below, feel free. But just off the top of my head, I do think depression is going to be one of those ones that you're going to have to fight and be incongruent with your biology because we know it's an objective bad. The same way obesity, even if you are predisposed to being obese, it is something because it's such an objective bad that you're going to have to fight it. It is going to be more optimal for you to be incongruent to your biology. Now, someone made a comment once saying like, well, is the effort that you're going to have to put in if you're just so drastically towards the end of the spectrum? If you're so drastically towards the end of the spectrum where you have to put in just tons and tons of copious effort to not be obese, like, is it still worth it then? I would say, like, that's a good thought. Like, I like how you're thinking. But, yeah, I would say being obese, being fat is just so bad that no matter how much effort it takes, especially in the modern environment with GLP-3s. But I guess that leads me to say, like, well, with depression, does that mean, like, pharmaceuticals are also the cop-out for it? And that's where it's interesting. It's like, fuck. I just contradicted myself, didn't I, Say, uh-oh. Does that mean maybe for some people pharmaceuticals, drugs are the answer for depression? It's a tough thing to discuss. And it's so much more nuanced than everyone makes it out to seem. I was someone who always was like, no, pharmaceuticals are never the answer, but that's a nuanced thing worth considering, like the amount of copious effort some people need to change their environment. Like, because it's all a spectrum, right? Some people are all the way towards the right side of the spectrum where it's like you're extremely likely to be depressed. Other people are more towards the middle to right, like 70% there, right? It's such an interesting thing to think about. But generally, what I would suggest before you consider the pharmaceutical route, it's try to convince yourself and manipulate your mind somehow that it's not real, which is going to be hard because what I'm saying is all backed by evidence. But look, the man who lives in a haunted house and doesn't believe in ghosts, he will easily fall asleep and be energized the next day. But the man who chooses to believe in ghosts will sleep poorly and live with low energy the next day. I love that analogy he gave. So you're going to have to try to manipulate yourself. Depression is one of those things that is an outlier. Just like obesity, it's an outlier one where you're going to have to be incongruent to your biology. But that doesn't mean everything else is. There's so many disorders that people get prescribed medications for that they don't need to. This is a very nuanced conversation, guys. It's not black and white. You don't have to choose two camps for all of these disorders. You don't have to be part of the zero pharmaceuticals camp and then be like, I'm never taking a GLP-3 to fight my obesity. That just might be an outlier. That might be one thing you're willing to do pharmaceutical intervention for if you're really fucking fat. Because it is genetic, that's the truth. But these red pill copers, they don't want to admit that. But again, like we talked about how Andrew Tate has that unique view on it and understanding of it. He's definitely one of the more intelligent ones. I would say he's quite high IQ. I like to assign numbers to people. I have an idea of where I'd rank Andrew Tate's IQ. It's pretty well up there. But most of these red pill copers are not. A lot of them are above average intelligence, but not as much as you'd think. Same with the black pill creators. A lot of black pill creators are just barely above average intelligence, but they seem like they're smarter than they are because they're very introspective. But this isn't IQ mainly. It's really a lot of neurodivergence. It's a lot of schizophrenia at play here and also OCD. But remember, the whole theme of today's video, generalist genes, none of these things are like their own thing. None of these things are their own thing. It's like all connected. All of it. I mean, we have terms for summing up some of them, the patterns. Like we have a term, ADHD or whatever, to sum up a couple of things that come together. But all right, I think we're rambling a bit too much. We're at 40 minutes now. But yeah, main point is try to live congruent for the most part with these disorders that you have, and you could turn them into strengths, and you could build a life like this. Now, I've become less and less materialistic over the years, and that's a whole conversation for another day. Subscribe and stick around for that. But at the end of the day, I'd rather have this and have achieved something than be a fucking nobody who achieved nothing and is living in a shithole. Money has advantages beyond the material too. But yeah, I think you guys get the message here. And hopefully you learn something about genetics too. That's all.